that you feel so alone. You feel like you're the only person in the world going through this who can't sleep, because everybody around you, one, seems to be able to sleep, and two, doesn't seem to understand what you're going through at all. That, it's a lonely place to be. Insomnia is still so misunderstood. So it's just really a desire to kind of, help people, because it's a really dark place to be. It's a really lonely place to be. It's not the fear itself, it's the way that you respond to it. And if you can kind of like accept it and then just gently take some of its power away. So yeah, I'm fearful. Yeah, I have that feeling in my stomach now. This isn't comfortable, but it's all right. It's safe. It's so true that it's not forever. It doesn't last forever. And, as soon as once you go down this path of understanding and education, you've started on a journey, and there'll be times where it doesn't feel like it. And every time you have a speed bump, it feels like the worst, because your brain's screaming out, we can't go back there, alert. But, you will, it will pass. It doesn't last forever.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another really special Talking Insomnia episode. We have Jonathan with us. Welcome.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Really nice having you here. And for those of you who don't know Jonathan, which will probably be most of you, I'll just say that we worked together quite a bit, because you graduated from our coach certification program. And as I heard kind of snippets of your story, I was curious to hear more, and I thought you had a lot to share with the audience that could help. So I invited you, and I'm so glad you're here. So with that said, then tell us in your words, Jonathan, what prompted it? How did you start having trouble sleeping?
Yeah, so it started for me. It was back in 2016. Although looking back on it, I do remember, and it's one of these things that kind of you come to realize later, that there had been a few short periods of not sleeping well for 2 or 3 nights, which preceded that. And I think, already the small episodes had kind of triggered a certain anxiety in me and a certain fear of not sleeping. I found it very, very uncomfortable. So I think even when it started, I already had this slight fear around it. But it really started probably in 2016. And interestingly, I don't know what the trigger is, which I know is fairly unusual. A lot of people obviously have this trigger, something stops them sleeping, and then it then turns into insomnia when the trigger disappears. But that fear and anxiety around not sleeping is still there. But for me, like, I don't know what the trigger was. I just had a really bad night when I couldn't sleep. And then obviously that pretty quickly escalated into, what if I don't sleep the next night? And then again the next night, I had a lot of difficulty sleeping. And then into this kind of rabbit hole, which I'm sure a lot of viewers will be familiar with, frantically Googling, trying to find out what's going on. And then really doing all those things to try and find a cure, as it were. So, I did them all, the kind of the warm baths, the melatonin, the magnesium, so lots of supplement, sleep hygiene. And yeah, nothing really seemed to be very effective. I went hypnotherapy with somebody sort of delving into kind of my past to find out where this kind of anxiety around sleep might come from, or whether it came from my childhood. Again, nothing really helped, or things might help for a little while, but then they wouldn't again. So I remember getting into kind of guided meditations, and for a couple of nights, suddenly that really worked, and there was some relief, and I was sleeping well. And then as soon as I kind of thought I'd found the answer, then suddenly that didn't work, sending me into kind of more of a spiral. So this kind of carried on for a good few months, and I was getting some sleep. It was kind of punctuated by some nights of decent sleep where I'd just be so tired. But generally, yeah, very poor sleep, very fragmented sleep. Did get prescribed some medication, and I remember being put on antidepressants, which was a strange one, because I felt depressed, but I was depressed about not sleeping. And I think that's kind of, one of those misunderstandings that often come with insomnia. So you go to the doctor and they say, are you depressed? And you say, well, yeah, because I'm not sleeping. Are you anxious? Yes, because I'm not sleeping. But then they say, oh, you've got depression, you've got anxiety. So these antidepressants, I don't even remember what they were, didn't really work. Gave me a little, sometimes seemed to work a little bit, but I don't know if it was them or something else. So nothing was really helping.
And then start to jump in, Jonathan, but during this period of time in 2016, how were you functioning during the day? What were your days like?
Okay, it was kind of, you kind of go into this kind of basic survival mode. And I did, after the antidepressants not really working, I was prescribed one of the Z drugs, I think they call them Zopiclone, and that did often help. That would knock me out. So I kind of like started planning out my week strategically. So like, right, I need a good night's sleep on this night, so I'll take it this night, and I'll take it this night. Then I'll have a couple of nights of bad sleep, but I can just about get through them. And then you got the weekend. So yeah, I mean, I was functioning okay. One of the things that when I was on my recovery, I began to reflect on was that actually you can function and you can do all right, with a limited amount of sleep. But at the time, you don't really see that because you're just kind of in this all-consuming, how can I get out of it? So just kind of, survival really, but feeling very low.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And the other question that I'm sure a lot of people will have that listening in terms of the nights, was it a lot of nights where like you had very little sleep, or was it more like the kind of choppy, like frequent awakenings or trouble falling asleep, or what were the nights like?
So very choppy, and I had this kind of peculiar pattern. Again, a lot of what I say is with the kind of the luxury of what you call it, the knowing now what I know. And one of the things that I know is that there is really not much clue in the pattern, and everyone has different patterns, but the kind of the source of your insomnia is the same. It's internally generated. It's fear. It's anxiety. But my pattern felt pretty unique at the time, because what would always happen is I would be very tired. I'd go straight to sleep, and then I would wake up like 2-3 minutes later. Always. There was like this really, really short burst of sleep, and then I'd be awake again. And usually I'd then turn over, go back to sleep, another 5 minutes, awake, and then that was it. And there was always a second awakening after very, very short periods of sleep. That was it. Hyperarousal, and I'd be up. On a good night, it would be, I'd just be up for another couple of hours, 2-3 hours. Bad night could be, till the very early hours.
Yeah.
And very little sleep at all.
All right. No, thanks for sharing that. And that's so valuable. I've done so many of these recordings, as you know, and this particular experience, I don't think anybody's talked about, but I'm sure in the audience, there'll be a couple of people like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going through. And that's so valuable. And people know that they're not alone. So I want to thank you for that. And with that said, just take us back to the story. You've gotten the Z drugs now, and you're sort of managing with them. And what happens next?
And then I remember a really bad night, and then kind of frantically searching the internet. And this is back in 2016, so there's a lot less out there then. But I came across Guy Meadows Sleep School, which is kind of based on principles of ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. Not that I knew that then, actually. What really caught my eye was there was this very little short video, and the basic thing was it was an animated video. What do normal sleepers do to go to sleep? And the answer is nothing. And you're like, oh, okay. How does that work? Because I've tried everything. And it can't be as simple as doing nothing, because if it was just doing nothing, I would be asleep now. But it's one of these ideas, and like what we teach on the sleep coach school, that it's an incredibly simple idea, but it takes it can be quite complicated to convey that simplicity, if that's not too much of a paradox. So I was kind of intrigued. I signed up for a workshop, and that was really, I would say, the beginning of the recovery from this bout. of insomnia. I went to this workshop. I got the book, Guy Meadows' book, and the Sleep School.
I'm curious about this one. Is this a live workshop, and is Guy Meadows himself there, or how does that work?
He's not. Somebody who works for the company was Dr. Katerina. I don't remember her full name. She was fantastic. So yeah, she takes it. I don't think they do them anymore. I think now because everything's, online.
Oh my, yeah.
But it was really nice to go and meet. It was in London, and it was just go and meet other people who were in the same struggle. Because that's the first thing about insomnia, that you feel so alone. You feel like you're the only person in the world going through this who can't sleep, because everybody around you, one, seems to be able to sleep, and two, doesn't seem to understand what you're going through at all. So it's incredibly it's a lonely place to be. And that's why now, I think it's great that we've got these kind of communities and your YouTube channel and things like that. I don't think that was really there in 2016. So that was a live workshop. A lot of the principles, I think, are very similar to the Sleep Coach School. Not all of them, and I think we'll probably get to that later. But generally, the idea of acceptance and not struggling, not fighting a battle against insomnia, because it's not a battle. That was the beginning. That was really the beginning of the recovery. Learning about the amygdala, learning about the hyperarousal that is fueling your insomnia. And you say this a lot. Once you go there, you don't really go back, because that first bit of understanding is so key. That it is all internally generated. That it's not something else causing this.
Absolutely. I say that a lot. That once it's something you cannot really unsee. Like once you've understood kind of the foundations, you can still have speed bumps and struggles, but you're not going to go back to like that place of like complete pause, like we have no clue what's going on, which is so difficult. So okay, so really nice. You found a live seminar where you learned these things, and did things sleep wise and kind of how you felt during the day. Did it pretty soon after that seem get easier, or what happened next?
Pretty soon after, it really started to improve a lot, and I noticed this improvement, and then I gradually came out of it with speed bumps along the way. Didn't know about speed bumps. Though they don't really go into that concept. I think speed bumps is something that I actually only discovered from the Sleep Coach School a lot later, which is, it's really important. I mean, as you said, sleep bumps are they're not something that happens after. It's something they're absolutely a part of it. And like you said, if you don't have speed bumps, did you ever even have insomnia? So it's such an integral part of it, because it's impossible, I think, to just have a linear path out of insomnia. But at the time, so I didn't really know. So there were a lot of speed bumps, but gradually things got a lot better, and I kind of made my peace with it. Again, looking back later, I think because it came back, why it came back is because I still didn't fully understand the extent of that fear plays in this. So I think I kind of made my peace with it. But every time I had a rough patch, it would always be that fear and anxiety would come back quite badly. And it was always, I went straight to catastrophe mode. One night of poor sleep, and the next day you're already catastrophizing. I'm going back to that place. And that's, and that's what fuels it. But I don't think I realized that at the time.
So things got significantly easier after that course, but there was still kind of some fear in the background that popped up here and there, and then that triggered a little bit of a speed bump or a little shorter period of struggle. But you somehow, I guess you still kind of deploy the same teachings of acceptance, and that's how these speed bumps, so if you will, kind of faded out, or how did you manage those?
Yeah. It's funny because what I often do would kind of go back to the old, the old teachings. I used to, that Guy Meadows book was a bit of a, Bible for me. I'd get it off the shelf and I'd start reading it. And by the time I'd got to kind of like chapter 3, things had steadied themselves again. So it was good, but it was like it was kind of keeping things at bay rather than I still hadn't gone I still hadn't really gone and met the fear. I think you called it one of your videos closing the hood. I was closing the hood a little bit. And then about 5 years later, 2021, suddenly it came back. This time there was a trigger. There was something going on in my personal life, which was difficult, and that gave me this kind of sleepless night, which then led to another one and another one. And then it was back. And then I'm getting the book out and reading it, but it's not working anymore. And suddenly, I feel like I'm straight back in it. And I was kind of trying to deploy all these tactics that I'd tried before. And I guess that, that's a clue when I say tactics, because I was, unknowing I was back in the battle. And, I vividly remember one night kind of lying there going, I'm safe, telling my brain I'm safe. And of course, I was not feeling that, at all. When you're kind of like, it turns and you're kind of almost repeating something like a mantra to yourself that you're safe. The point is you've got to really believe that you're safe. And at this time I didn't. So that's when, and so that then this second period in 2021 was probably, more intense than the first in a way. It came back with a vengeance. And because what had helped in the past wasn't helping anymore, I think that kind of, made it even more, okay, well, all right, this is it now. This is, this is me for life. And you get that. I think a lot of people get that with insomnia. They're just like, in a way, they just, right, this is part of my identity. Got back on the, sleeping pills, which again is very anxiety inducing, because I think in England, I think it's not the same as in America. I might be wrong, but in England, it's quite hard to get prescription for things like Zopiclone. So there's always that anxiety in the back of your mind, like, well, you've got to kind of plead your case and say it's only for short-term use. So that also, causes a lot of anxiety. It's a short-term solution, but it's short-term. One, because, there's problems with taking this stuff long-term, but two, you don't even know if you're going to be able to get it long-term. And that's really when I came across your channel. And the way that was on Guy Meadows. Guy Meadows has a Facebook community, which is very, very helpful, actually. Lots of people on it giving each other, it's generally unmoderated, it's, users, but lots of really helpful advice on there. Again, going back to that thing about being alone, it's such a lonely place. And if you can find a community like that, it's really important. So long as you find a good one and not one of the kind of catastrophizing, you're going to die if you have insomnia type communities, which are also out there. So you've got to be careful. And then your name kind of kept cropping up and kind of, this must have been about, it was 2021, kind of, this is getting on for kind of late summer 2021. I've probably been, having this bout of insomnia for about 6 months. And your name was increasingly popping up. And at first I was very like, wary of trying something else. You think I was going to be a completely different approach. I just don't know if I can do this. And is it CBT? Because I've tried a bit of CBT and hadn't found that helpful. But then, I just started watching before I even watched your videos, somebody said, and this was the thing that changed it all for me, because despite all the stuff in the ACT thing about the amygdala, I still don't think they make it this explicit. Somebody kind of quoted you or paraphrased you, and they said, insomnia is not an inability to sleep, it's a fear of not sleeping. And how that, that was a light bulb moment for me. That really was. Because it was like, okay, that makes sense. I'm doing everything I can to avoid, sleeplessness, to avoid wakefulness, with very limited success. But this is driving everything I do. So it's like a phobia. It's not an inability to sleep. And they also said it's not that you're unable to sleep, it's just your brain's not letting you at the moment. And that kind of, that kind of understanding is just such a relief. When I heard that, everything changed really. And that's when I started watching some videos, getting into your channel, and see, the one problem I have with the ACT approach is they generally tend to say, you have to you have to. It's the opposite of CBT. So whereas CBTi, kind of extreme CBTi, if you like, says get out of bed, don't stay in bed. It's kind of the opposite, but it can also be a bit extreme. It's like just accept it. Lie there with the acceptance, but that is completely overwhelming a lot of the time. When you are just kind of wrecked with anxiety about not sleeping, you can't just lie there and accept it. And all this stuff about, well, just feel how the bed feels against your body, and think about all the sounds you can hear. And well, it might work for some people, but I think when you are overwhelmed with anxiety, it really doesn't work, for me anyway. And when kind of I discovered in your channel that it's all right to check your phone, and it's all right to stick the TV on, and it's all right to read a book, that was very liberating as well, because. And then it was only then that I could really befriend wakefulness. So this is the problem before. Although I'd kind of made my peace with it, I'd never really befriended wakefulness. So it was that process, befriending wakefulness, which is really hard. And I wouldn't say to anyone. And what I say now to people is, you don't have to pretend. You don't have to try and trick your brain and pretend that you're enjoying it. Because, nobody really wants to be in that position when you're, reading a book at 3 a.m. and you've got to wake up at 7. But you do know that objectively it is safe. And your brain just needs to know that you're safe and there is no danger, and there is no danger. So yeah, just knowing that. And what was interesting is once I knew that, often I didn't need to. Often I didn't need to turn the TV on or switch the light on and read a book. It was just knowing that I could do that was very, very helpful. Yeah. And so then from there, kind of slowly came out of it, and then the kind of path to recovery, and then really wanting to kind of share some of my experiences with other people, and that's what got me into where we are today, having been in your coaching classes.
Yeah. Wow, wonderful to hear that. I'm so glad somebody mentioned our channel, and you found it and you found it helpful. And I want to stay maybe 1 second longer on this topic of CBTi says, if you haven't fallen asleep in 15 minutes, get out. And in ACT or ACT, you find a different approach, which is essentially like, no, don't leave the bed no matter what. Now, I'm guessing, my thinking here is that, ACT is kind of a broad philosophy, that the idea that you should stay in bed is not necessarily representative of ACT, but more an idea that we find within the sleep school, which is ACT based. Now, what I find sort of interesting is when I have often gotten this question of like, hey, Daniel, like Guy Meadows says you have to stay in bed if you're awake at night. When I read his book, the sleep book, specifically looking for him saying that, and I can't find it. When I read the book, it appears to me as if it's like very nice and very sound advice, and it sounds to me as if what he's really trying to say is, don't try to run away from your feelings, And my guess is that if I asked him like, oh, if you leave your bed just because it feels nice, it's not about running away from your emotions, but you just, it's kind of easier to meet your emotions when you're maybe reading a book or whatnot. Then my guess is that he would say, yeah, that's fine. But then it seems kind of rigid in what you come across. It sounds kind of rigid. So I don't know, Guy Meadows, if you're out there, I would love to have you as a guest, but I've actually asked, I haven't heard back from him, but what are your thoughts on that? Does it seem like it's integral to the philosophy, or is it just maybe a misunderstanding that has been perpetuated in the community, or what are your thoughts on that?
I distinctly remember reading a bit where it does talk about levels and medals, and the gold standard being to stay in bed, all night without doing anything, and then I think the silver is doing something in bed, and then the bronze would be sitting on the side of your bed. Did I misremember that? I'm pretty sure that is in the book.
It's maybe me that haven't seen this, or maybe we have different editions of the book. I don't know, but we can maybe check that later. But because otherwise, I think it's so similar. Like the general teachings are so very similar. Apart maybe on that point.
I think generally, it's not. I'm sure it's not as rigid as people perhaps misinterpret. And I think you're right. The overwhelming philosophy is just to accept and and befriend those difficult emotions. That's definitely the core of it. But I think there is kind of an emphasis on perhaps sleep hygiene, having a set wake time that maybe leads into this kind of stuff. Because I do remember him saying something about, well, when you switch the light on, then that's obviously waking your brain up a little bit. So there's stuff like that. I think so. It's certainly, I think they would prefer you to stay in the bed.
Stay in bed and to keep it dark, etc. Yeah, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, next question for you was when did kind of the idea of becoming a sleep coach, helping others, how did that come about?
I think it's probably just the sort of the insights that you get on the journey, and realizing that there are so many people out there who are kind of still stuck in the struggle, and it's really just through a lack of education. It's just because people don't know about these ways. Insomnia is still so misunderstood. So it's just really a desire to kind of help people, because it's a really dark place to be. It's a really lonely place to be. So just also kind of my background is in education. I've got a background in teaching, so I like to be able to teach and to share knowledge. So it felt like kind of like quite a natural path to go into. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, when I started on the coaching, funnily enough, or towards the end of the coaching, suddenly, bang, guess what? After 3 or 4 years, it's another speed bump. But it was just that thing about, suddenly I had this pressure. Well, if you want to be a sleep coach, you got to be able to sleep. You can't be a sleep coach if you don't sleep. Which obviously, looking back, I know is kind of, was just me kind of catastrophizing a little bit again. But again, it was waking up your nervous system to that fear. And I really realized, one of your colleagues, somebody, I'm sure viewers of the channel will know, Coach Michelle always says, doesn't she, that learning happens in the speed bump. And boy, did that learning happen to me, because that's when I really, really saw it so clearly, that I had this kind of vision of this, this kind of old-fashioned kind of generators that you'd wind up with a pump, and you'd have to crank the handle. And as you crank the handle, if it's like, this kind of red light kind of comes on, and you keep it going by keep cranking that handle. And that's what the fear does. And it's not what happens so much at night. It's what happens in the day. When you wake up the next morning and you're still worried and you're fearful about what's going to happen at night, you're just keeping it going. You're just keeping it going. Because you think about all these, you hear all the time people talking about sleepless nights. I've got a sleepless night. And often, you think, oh, do you have insomnia? And that people look at you like, no. What are you talking about? It's just, no, it was a sleepless night. Because for a lot of people, when you don't have that anxiety, you have a sleepless night and that's gone and it's done. It's finished. But, when you have insomnia, it's not. It keeps going. The night might be over, but that fear just keeps it going. So it's all about, finding a way to deal with that fear. And the way to deal with that fear, I think, is one, understanding how it's going on, and two, getting to a place where you can accept it. And acceptance comes from, trying not to let it dominate your day, doing the things that you like doing in the day, trying to, as much as you can, without forcing it to go about, your normal life, and not putting your insomnia on this pedestal, and then letting it dominate your life.
Yeah. So well said. When you were sharing that analogy of like cranking the handle there, I think it illustrates so nicely a paradox, which is that a lot of people in our community think like insomnia is kind of happening on its own and they have to find a way to stop it. But in reality, it's the opposite. It's like the fear and the insomnia, it requires something. It requires us to put in a lot of effort. And it's like the opposite. It's like just when we no longer try to stop it or maintain it, control it, then it ends by itself. So it's a paradox there, but right.
And just to come in there, I wouldn't want viewers to misunderstand me, and I'm not saying, right, it's fear that's keeping you going, so you've got to do everything you can to stop this fear. because you can't fight against fear. Fear is just it's a natural emotion. It's absolutely human for you to fear something that you don't like. So it's it's not the fear itself, it's the way that you respond to it. And if you can kind of like accept it and then just gently take some of its power away. So I'm fearful. Yeah, I have that feeling in my stomach now. This isn't comfortable, but it's all right. It's safe, and I can accommodate it.
Well said. And now, I have a couple more questions for you. Two are sort of my standard last questions, which is one, if you could travel back in time to 2016, what would you tell yourself?
Probably what most people say on this channel, but it's so true, that it's not forever. It doesn't last forever, and as soon as once you go down this path of understanding and education, you started on a journey, and there'll be times where it doesn't feel like it. And every time you have a speed bump, it feels like the worst, because your brain's screaming out, we can't go back there, alert, alert. But you will, it will pass. It doesn't last forever. And I would say, really stay in the present. So mindfulness, is all about staying in the present. And there are aspects of mindfulness that don't, as I said before, don't really work for me. I find it very difficult to practice mindfulness techniques in the middle of the night, or I did when I was, feeling anxious. But I think the central premise of mindfulness is anchoring yourself to the present. And that is so helpful to anchor yourself to the present, because when you think about it, the past is the past. It's gone. And if you look back, and when it comes to sleep and analyzing your past, it doesn't get you anywhere. And your future, you have no control over the future. So actually, all you've really got to focus on is what is happening in the present moment. And actually, when you understand that you are not in any danger in this present moment, then that's really key. And then that kind of can unlock everything. Because in the present, you are not in any danger. And if you just focus on the present, it doesn't matter really how long it's been going on for, whether it's been going on for 2 weeks or 10 years, because you only have to focus on what's happening now.
Yeah. It's one of those, like, every time I hear it, I almost get goosebumps, because it's so true. The present is the only thing that will ever exist, and we are safe in the present. Like, so,
Yeah.
so true. All right. The other one was, have you learned things from this struggle with sleep that has been helpful in other areas of life?
Yeah, definitely. I think generally, and the kind of, acceptance has helped with other emotions. So recognizing when you're stressed, when you're anxious, just kind of, rather than trying to fight against that feeling, but just kind of accepting, welcoming the unwelcome, and sitting with those feelings and recognizing those feelings, I think has helped with a lot of stress.
Yeah.
I noticed things like, I was at work, and there was a group of learners kind of discussing, this is kind of going back into a topic of sleep, but it's just like, kind of learning things when you're not explicitly trying, focusing on sleep. But, there was somebody, a girl who just works all the hours that God sends, working in a care home, coming to college, doing her study. And all the other girls were kind of saying to her, how do you do it? So what are they talking about? They were talking about sleep. And she was just saying, yeah, I don't really, don't sleep much. So yeah, I get a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there. And it was like, there was no fear, there was no anxiety around it. This is just like what she did. And because she hadn't got into that kind of, that spiral that I went into, and many of us have gone into, it wasn't a problem not sleeping. And that was really interesting for me as well, because again, it's just that thing that it's like, it's so much about the power that you give something, which makes it powerful.
Yeah, 100%. I remember you sharing that in class while you were, still taking the course. But cool. I before we finish off for today, Actually, one last thing. This is a little bit of a curveball, but it came to me as we were speaking. I wanted to ask you about this. So, um, I actually asked you if you would like to come on board as a coach within the sleep coach school, and unfortunately, at this time, you had other obligations. So you said I don't really have time to commit to that. But I know that you have actually done some coaching with some clients, and so far, how's that been?
That's been great. Yeah, I've been working with Joseph, lights gone off. Joseph Parnell, who's I think who also came through the sleep coach school, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Um, and he's got a wait list. So and I met him through this coaching community. So he's referred me some clients, and yeah, that's been great. That's been really good. Yeah, and I've been doing some, and I've been sort of creating some content as well. So I've been making some animated videos because I kind of thought I just kind of wanted to try a different angle. I wanted to get a message across, but maybe not the kind of format of just me talking to the camera. So I've been making a few videos and putting them online, and that's been really enjoyed doing that because I enjoy the creative process. And yeah, I hope that they can be helpful to people as well.
Yeah, 100%. I'm sure they will. And I will, of course, link to that in the description so people can find that. And that's Jonathan. Thanks so much for being here today. And we'll be in touch.
Hi there, it's me, Coach Daniel. And I hope it is obvious to you to what degree we at the Sleep Coach School really try to put out content that will help you on your path to peaceful sleep and peace of mind. And I hope you really enjoyed the video that you just watched. Now, some people don't learn the best by watching videos, but rather by reading. And I wanted to share a little tip with you. The books that most people really talk about having helped them is This Is Nato and Set It and Forget It. But I think most people miss out on my personal favorite, which is Tales of Courage. All of my books are available on Amazon. But Tales of Courage is special because in Tales of Courage, we've taken 26 success stories from the channel, and we've taken sort of the most powerful language, the most inspirational and educational parts of those interviews and put them in a book. And I think it is really, really so strong, so powerful when you read those words from other people who left the struggle. And that's my little tip to you. Tales of Courage, I think, is a great book, and it's available on Amazon, of course. So if that's appealing to you, you can head over there and get a copy. But more than anything else, I just want to say thank you for being here. Thanks for supporting the channel, and can't wait to see you again. Bye for now.